Welcome to Crossroads. A Chinese spy has been convicted in New York. Now, this individual who was known as a pro-democracy activist, right? He infiltrated their circles. He was found to be providing information on Chinese dissidents to the CCP. Similar cases are being increasingly uncovered in the U.S., where the regime is finding ways to extend its surveillance and its human rights abuses outside of China. Now, this is the official statement from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They say this: Shujun Wang, an academic and author who helped start a pro-democracy organization in Queens, New York, that opposes the current communist regime in China, was convicted today by a federal jury in Brooklyn on all 4 counts of an indictment charging him with acting and conspiring to act as an agent of a foreign government without prior notification to the U.S. Attorney General, criminal possession, identification, and making false statements to law enforcement. It says that Wang's co-defendants, and this is interesting, in the espionage and transnational repression scheme are Feng He, Jie Ming Li, and Keijing Liu, are officials from China's Ministry of State Security. So they actually indicted in this several officials with the MSS, basically the CCP's equivalent of like a combination of the FBI and the CIA. One of the main intel branches of the Chinese Communist Party were just indicted in this. It knows that they remain at large, and when sentenced, Wang, the individual who was charged, faces up to 25 years in prison. It notes that Wang is a naturalized U.S. citizen of Chinese descent and one of the founders of the pro-democracy Hu Yaobang and Zhao Ziyang Memorial Foundation. It's an organization located in Flushing, Queens, which notably, in the early days of my work, as a journalist investigating Chinese spy networks, that was where I focused a lot of my work because there's a lot of them there. It notes that this is in Queens, and it's a note that the members of this organization are well-known pro-democracy dissidents who oppose the current Chinese government of the PRC, People's Republic of China. But instead promoting democracy in the PRC, Wang, this individual, at the direction of the PRC government, the CCP, right, of their officials, used his position within the Memorial Foundation and his status within the Chinese diaspora community to collect information about prominent activists, academics, and dissidents, and reported that information to the PRC government. In other words, what he did was got access to this pro-democracy circle and then used that access, pretending like he was supporting democracy, to go and spy on all these other Chinese dissidents. And it said at the MSS's direction, Ministry of State Security, Wang gathered information on people and groups that the PRC considers subversive, such as Hong Kong democracy protesters, advocates for Taiwanese independence, and Uyghur and Tibetan activists, both in the United States and abroad. And it's that Wang conducted face-to-face meetings with MSS officials while on trips to China, and used WeChat, notably controlled by Chinese companies, to receive orders from his co-defendants and to send and receive written messages and files. It says Wang often memorialized the information he collected in email diaries to be accessed by the MSS. And this is interesting because he was essentially writing status reports to himself over email in the form of diaries. Dear diary, today I met with so-and-so, a prominent democracy activist who lives here, and these are his family members, or who knows what he was writing, right? But notes these diaries included details about Wang's private conversations with prominent dissidents, as well as the activities of pro-democracy activists and human rights organizations. He was reporting on it to the CCP. Now look, this case was actually one of just several arrests that took place back in March of 2022. Wang, this individual, was one of a series of arrests carried out and announced at the same time. This is back when the Department of Justice actually announced it. It said 2 complaints were unsealed and 1 amended complaint was authorized today in federal court in Brooklyn, New York, charging 5 defendants with various crimes related to efforts by the secret police of the People's Republic of China, PRC, to stalk, harass, and spy on Chinese nationals residing in Queens, New York, and elsewhere in the United States. It says all the defendants allegedly perpetrated transnational repression schemes to target U.S. residents whose political views and actions are disfavored by the PRC government. such as advocating for democracy in China. And it said in one of these schemes, the conspirators sought to interfere with federal elections by allegedly orchestrating a campaign to undermine the congressional candidacy of a U.S. military veteran who was a leader of the 1989 pro-democracy demonstrations in Beijing, right? Tiananmen Square massacre, in other words, right? When you had pro-democracy movements there. And in another of these schemes, 3 defendants planned to destroy the artwork of a PRC national residing in Los Angeles, California, that was critical of the PRC government and planted surveillance equipment in the artist's workplace and car to spy on him from China.
These cases expose attempts by the government of the People's Republic of China to suppress dissenting voices within the United States. They demonstrate how the PRC seeks to stalk, intimidate, and silence those who oppose them. In discussing these cases, I want to be very clear that the Department remains focused on the threats and actions of the PRC government and its agents, not the Chinese people or people of Chinese descent, who are often the victims of these crimes.
Now, these spy networks are actually things that I've been personally exposing going back to 2008. I've talked about some of my work before on the show. I've been a journalist with Epoch Times since 2006. I used to be back just doing local news in San Diego, where I'm from, and also at the time, being a student and just working on the side. In 2008, I was offered an internship to come work for Epoch Times in New York, and when I went to New York, I got assigned to go to Flushing, Queens, notably where all this is happening. Now, Flushing, Queens, if you've been to New York, it's kind of like the new Chinatown. You take the 7 train all the way to the end in Queens, you get to Flushing, and it's one of the largest Chinese communities. At the time back in 2008, that was an important time because that was right ahead of the Beijing Olympics. They called it the Bloody Olympics because the CCP all around the Olympics was persecuting Tibetans and arresting people and kind of upping its external systems as well to go after dissidents. That was the whole thing that was going on at the time. Now, what ended up happening in 2008 was that alongside this whole kind of external push by the CCP, suddenly there were all these, pro-CCP activists all over the place. And they were beating, they were attacking, they were spitting on anybody who opposed the Chinese Communist Party, in Chinese neighborhoods mostly. And these individuals coming out sometimes literally in the hundreds. They were targeting, notably in Queens at the time, democracy activists, Falun Gong practitioners, Taiwan activists, and so on. And it was shocking. There were videos at the time that, of course, I was there reporting. They were beating people. They were attacking people, tearing people's human rights banners. It was shocking. And when I was doing this work, I was watching this unfold. I'm like, man, what's going on here? All these Chinese people started telling me, oh, those people attacking us are agents of the Chinese Communist Party. And look, at that time, back in 2008, most of this stuff was unknown. There were really no media talking about it. There were very few, if any, government reports. I don't really remember any at the time talking about it. And so there was nothing to go on. I launched an investigation. Actually, my career as an investigative journalist started because of this. And what I ended up uncovering was what's called the United Front Work Department, which includes notably the networks of what people now know as these, secret Chinese police stations. My work in 2008 was exposing those. And the way the CCP does it is this. They send agents to the Chinese consulates, right? So the Chinese consulate in New York, we found, in fact, we got a recording of the Chinese consul general admitting this. They were actually orchestrating these attacks. The Chinese consulate works as like a pseudo-government branch of the CCP, and they regard that as like the provincial government of whatever region they're in. The Chinese consulate in New York is the Chinese government provincial office for the entire, northeast of the United States. The Chinese consulate in Los Angeles, that is the Chinese provincial government for California and several surrounding states. And they run and operate things all around them. What they do is this. They go into Chinese communities, and you have what are called tongs. Tongs are like Chinese unions or fraternal organizations and community organizations and things like this. Basically, the tongs one of the reasons why Chinatowns notably are such unique Chinese neighborhoods is because of the Tongs. And the way they essentially worked is this. In traditional Chinese culture, you typically didn't have government below the county level, right? And so below the county level, you had a bottom-up form of government. And those were family associations, those were workers' guilds, those were unions, those were community associations, and so on. They call them Tongs. Groups like, for example, the Fujian American Association, the Shandong Association. They'll even have family name associations, of course, because you only have so many surnames in China, that unite people. And when people started immigrating to the West, the Tongs oftentimes facilitated that. And so the snakeheads, the human traffickers, they also work with the Tongs. The Tongs have a legitimate side where, if your cousin needs a job, they can help him find a job. But they also have an illegitimate side where human trafficking, slave labor, illegal gambling, that kind of stuff. And so the Chinese mafias also work within the Tongs. Not all of them, but some of them.